Today, we're diving into a huge question. After 45 years of theocratic rule, is the Islamic Republic of Iran actually on the brink of collapse? You've seen the headlines. Protests are raging, the state is hitting back hard, and the ground is shifting in ways we have not seen in decades.
The whole situation is, incredibly fragile. It feels like for the first time in a long time, we could genuinely be watching the end of the Islamic Republic as we know it. So, here's the big question we're going to explore. What does it actually take for a revolution to succeed? And are those conditions being met in Iran right now?
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at why this time feels so different. Then, we'll use a 5-point checklist to see if the real conditions for revolution are there. After that, we'll get into the wild cards that could change everything. And finally, we'll ask the biggest question of all: what could come next for Iran?
Okay, so how do we make sense of all this chaos? To really understand if the regime could be overthrown, we can't just look at the protests by themselves. We need some kind of framework, a way to measure the cracks in its very foundation.
And luckily, history gives us a pretty powerful tool for this. It's a set of 5 conditions that are almost always there when a revolution actually works. Think of it like a checklist for collapse. We're going to go through it point by point to see just how vulnerable the Iranian regime really is.
All right, let's get right into it. These are the 5 big signs of a potential fall, and together they'll help us build a really clear picture of what's happening inside Iran. Okay, so here they are. A really bad economic crisis, elites fighting amongst themselves, a huge and united opposition, a powerful news story or narrative, and an international scene that works against the regime. Let's start with the first one, which is probably the most obvious: the economy.
The first sign of deep trouble for any government is almost always money. And in Iran, the numbers are just staggering. Just look at this one, over 50%.
So what is that? Well, that's the country's official annual inflation rate. Now, to put that into perspective for you, in the US, if inflation goes over 5%, it can literally cost a president an election. In Iran, it's 10 times higher. That kind of economic pain, day in and day out, makes people truly desperate.
And it's not just inflation. The currency has totally collapsed. Back in 1979, $1 got you 70 Iranian rials. You know what it buys today? Over $500,000. Add to that falling oil money and an economy run by ideologues instead of actual experts, and, well, the picture is pretty grim. So is condition number 1 met? Oh, absolutely.
Okay, condition number 2. Are the people in charge divided? We tend to think of these authoritarian regimes as one solid block, but that is just not the case here. On the left, you've got the regime's hardcore. But look at the right side. We're talking about former presidents, prime ministers. These are founders of the revolution. And now they're being banned, monitored, or even put under house arrest because of fierce power struggles. The cracks are deep, and they are really starting to show.
And what's so crucial here is the defection of the Bazaris. This is the powerful merchant class that was a pillar of the 1979 revolution. They bankrolled the whole thing. But now, they've completely abandoned the regime. They feel betrayed as the Revolutionary Guard basically took over the economy. The only group that's really still united is the security forces because, let's be honest, if the regime falls, they lose everything. So condition 2? That's a big check.
Let's move on to our third condition: a broad, united opposition. And as you can see from all the different groups here, this is where things get really different from the past. Before, protests were often about just one thing. Not anymore.
Today's movement has pulled together this huge cross-section of Iranian society. We're talking women, merchants, ethnic minorities, students, the urban youth. They're not protesting single issues anymore. They are united by one single goal: the end of the Islamic Republic. And that unity makes them so much more dangerous to the regime. So yeah, condition 3 is clearly met.
Our fourth condition is about having a compelling new story, a new narrative. And this might be the most powerful shift of all. For 45 years, the regime's entire identity was built on fighting outside enemies. The classic chant was always, "Death to America." But just look at the new chant on the screen.
The focus has completely flipped inward. This is a new kind of Iranian nationalism. People just aren't interested in the regime's adventures in Lebanon or Palestine anymore. They're demanding that the nation's own resources be used to rebuild Iran for Iranians. It's this incredibly powerful story about liberation from an oppressor right at home. So, condition 4, a definite check.
And finally, our fifth condition: a favorable international scene. And right now, the regime has never looked more alone. Its allies in the region are weaker than ever.
Recent conflicts with Israel and the US show just how vulnerable its military is. And, crucially, when those clashes happened, its supposed allies, Russia and China, said nothing. The perception, for the first time, is that the regime is isolated and maybe, just maybe, beatable. All 5 conditions seem to be met.
So, if all 5 conditions are met, does that mean the regime's fall is a done deal? Well, not so fast. Now we have to look at the wild cards, those unpredictable factors that could tip the balance one way or the other. And the first and most important wild card can be summed up in just one number, 86. That is the age of the supreme leader Ali Khamenei, who is reportedly not in good health. For any dictatorship, the moment the leader dies is a moment of maximum danger. A power struggle at the very top, while the streets are literally on fire, that could be the trigger for a full-scale collapse.
The next wild card is the role of outside powers. Both the United States and Israel have wanted this regime gone for a long time, but what they do next is based on a really complex calculation of risk.
While both of them would love to see the regime fall, they are terrified of what comes next. As you can see here, for Israel, the absolute nightmare scenario is a loose nuke. Who gets their hands on Iran's nuclear material? And for the US, the big fear is a failed state, which could lead to regional war and total chaos. So their desire for change is held back by a deep fear of the unknown.
Which brings us to our final and maybe most important question. If the regime does fall, what comes next? Because, happy ending is far from guaranteed. Broadly speaking, there are 3 potential scenarios. And as you can see, the outcomes are just wildly different. The best-case scenario is a new democracy, maybe something like a constitutional monarchy. A more likely and much darker outcome is military rule, where the Revolutionary Guard just steps in and seizes power for themselves. And then there's the worst-case scenario, total state collapse, a devastating civil war, and the country breaking apart, just like we've seen in places like Libya.
So, this is where we're left. For the first time in 45 years, all the classic ingredients for a revolution seem to be there. The economy is broken, the elites are at each other's throats, the opposition is united, the story is changed, and the regime is all alone. But the final outcome is anything but certain. So the ultimate question really isn't if the regime will fall, but what will rise from its ashes? Will it be democracy or will it be chaos?